Support for this episode comes from the University of San Francisco's SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice, also known as JSSJ. If you're passionate about justice, equity, and inclusion, and you're looking for a distinctly Jewish lens, USF's graduate-level JSSJ certificate program offers a powerful opportunity to grow your impact and deepen your practice. This fall, dive into Arab Jews, Histories, Politics, and Identity with Hadar Cohen. Explore the complex and vital identity of Arab Jews and what it means to understand them as an integral part of the broader Jewish world. Applications are open now through August 15th. Learn more and apply at usfca.edu/JEDI. This is Judaism Unbound, episode 493, Tarot and Teshuva. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Lex Rofberg, and Dan is here today, but I'm popping in with the intro. Little switch up. Gotta keep things interesting. But today we are excited to continue a conversation that we began last week with Stav Appel on the intersection of tarot cards and Judaism. Because so many of our listeners have expressed interest in tarot over the years, and because Stav Appel's mini-course in the Onion Yeshiva on this topic was one of our most popular of all time, we thought that we'd add an additional episode into the mix for this little mini-series where we can schmooze a bit more about the Torah of Tarot. Our guest today to do just that is Mandie McGlynn, a longtime listener of Judaism Unbound. After connecting with our Elul Unbound Zoom gatherings many years ago, she went on to create a digital Elul initiative of her own called Turning Toward Life, an online guide that uses the tarot as a basis for reflection with a variety of fantastic resources curated together for every day of the month of Elul, each connected to a tarot card as part of the Hala month, the on-ramp month into the high holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Because of this episode's relationship to the month of Elul, which is coming up in a few weeks, beginning in late August, we wanted to officially announce that Elul Unbound will be back again this year. This annual Judaism Unbound initiative, mobilizing Elul as an on-ramp month into the high holidays, will be better than ever, featuring all sorts of wonderful resources and spiritual practices, along with once-a-week gatherings on Fridays throughout the month that you can attend via Zoom for free. If you'd like to learn more about Elul Unbound, just head to www.judaismunbound.com/ELUL. And if you like what you see, you can sign up for our Elul email list. That way you'll receive all sorts of wonderful Elul resources direct to your inbox for 5 to 10 minutes of meaningful spirituality a few times a week leading up to Rosh Hashanah. If you go to judaismunbound.com/Elul right now, you'll still see 2024 things there. We are in the process of updating that page for 2025. If you sign up for the email list that is linked on that page, you will be added to the one for this year. So don't fear that the year is off. And one other quick announcement before we start, a reminder that we have a new member of our podcast family. We just keep growing and growing at Judaism Unbound. Door to Door is a new podcast that follows a family, our own executive director Miriam Turlinchamp's family, making pilgrimages to their ancestral home over the course of 8 decades. Part investigative journalism and part memoir, Door to Door explores how 4 generations of a family metabolized a history of survival, trauma, and hope, and reclaimed a story nearly erased. It just was released July 23rd. The first episode is available, so listen to it wherever podcasts are found. And now a bit more about our guest today, Mandie McGlynn. Mandie McGlynn serves as a spiritual companion to folks from many religious and spiritual backgrounds, in addition to her day job helping gay men have babies. A resident of Skokie, Illinois, she is a member of Spiritual Directors International, holds a master's degree from Chicago Theological Seminary, where she wrote her master's thesis on spiritual care for the, quote, nuns, that's N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N-S, and studied spiritual guidance with the Spiritual Guidance Training Institute. She uses tarot as one of many tools to help her clients explore their own spiritual landscape, and created Turning Toward Life, this digital journey through the month of Elul utilizing tarot cards that we're talking about today, in 2019. Mandie McGlynn, welcome to Judaism Unbound. It's so great to have you.
Thank you so much, Lex.
Well, last week we spoke with Stav Appel about his work on a very old tarot deck and where he was finding these Jewish references. He calls it the Torah and the tarot, and this idea is that there are all kinds of hidden Jewish messages in this very old tarot deck. But we wanted to talk with you this week basically about tarot and how people use it now, in our time now, and particularly in Jewish contexts. But I thought that may be a good place to start for, I think, that many of our listeners who are like me and know nothing about tarot, to understand how is it used by people and why is it used that way more generally?
Some folks really do kind of the classic what people think of when they think of tarot, and it's more of a fortune telling sort of thing. They really are looking for insight into their future and reading that into the cards. The way I work with tarot is more as a spiritual tool. I think of tarot as kind of a mirror or a window into the parts of ourself that we often are not able to access as easily. A lot of the work that I do in my spiritual direction practice and with tarot, which I often incorporate, is use tarot as a tool to connect with the holy, whatever that means to people. For some folks, that's God. For some folks, it's the universe. For some folks, it's just their deepest and truest self. So when you're looking at a tarot card, there are all kinds of images and symbolism. When you're looking at these images, there are so many things that can come up within you. There's so much archetype in a tarot deck. So what you see when you look at any given card really speaks more to you and your relationship with yourself, your experience, God, speaks more to that than it speaks to what the card, quote, means.
Well, we talked a bit last week with Stavapel about some of the images on the cards, but we were talking mostly about whether and how they were connected to Jewish ideas. We didn't talk that much about what they are exactly. So I think that those of us who know nothing about tarot, like me, know that there's like a death card, and that could be scary if it comes up potentially. But what are the other cards? I mean, not all of them necessarily, but could you give us a little bit of a grounding in like how it all works? And I guess what I'm understanding from what you're saying is like reading great literature, a person wrote it who has a deep understanding of human beings, and that there are things in this literature that hit you really powerfully. And so I guess my question is whether, as you see it, like tarot has been designed kind of that way, and that's why people experience it as so powerful, because the cards are really connected to the things that make us human.
That definitely is a way some folks think of it, and a way that I think of it. I absolutely think of tarot as a sacred text. Many things can be sacred texts, including our own experiences, and tarot is one way that we tap into understanding our own experiences. And so a couple of examples of that would be the death card, the justice card, the fool. So there are 78 cards in a tarot deck. I'm not going to go through all of them, obviously, but it's separated into two sections. One is the major arcana, one is the minor arcana. And the most archetypal cards are those major arcana cards. The death card, for instance, could, for some folks, represent actual death. Could be a death they're processing or something like that. Folks who are looking at tarot more fortune telling, that's when the card becomes scary. Like, who am I going to die? Is someone I love going to die? But oftentimes we actually interpret death as more of a card about the death of something, the ending of something, which then the way that the major arcana works is it is kind of a journey. And so you're going from being this, the Fool card is 0. So you're going from being this person on the precipice of a journey all the way through to the last card in the major arcana is the World or the universe. And so it's kind of this individual to a more universal perspective.
So I'd love to get into the particulars of what you did with Turning Toward Life, this amazing Elul modality of sort of a tarot card, but not just a card. It's sort of a card plus some commentary on the card and questions and exercises for each day, like all of those for every day of the month of Elul, which it sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. Like, it's an incredible storehouse of spiritual practices and questions to contemplate for this month. That's all about introspection. I'd kind of love to ask I gave a little window, and Dan in the intro gave a little window, but like, in your words, sort of what is Turning Toward Life? And I guess as part of that, I'd love to hear how you describe what Elul is, because I know part of what Turning Toward Life is an Elul spiritual practice centered on tarot cards. We've given our sense of what this sort of on-ramp month is into the high holidays, but what's yours?
my understanding of Elul was really formed in large part by your understanding of Elul, because Judaism Unbound was so central to my experience of coming into Judaism. I converted to Judaism. Elul Unbound was one of my first experiences. I think it might have been your first Elul Unbound in 2018 that I was part of.
Yeah, this will be our 8th go round.
That's wild. I can't even conceive of that being 8 years ago. But so for me, I really lean into that idea of cheshbon hanefesh, an accounting of the soul. Elul as a time to really do deep reflection and turn inward, explore what our year has been, or maybe more than a year, and just really think about the things that are important and meaningful. And so that's where the title of my little course came from, was this idea that we're turning, that Teshuva, which is the big spiritual concept we talk about during the high holidays, literally means turning, right? And so we're turning toward life. So some of the pieces that go into each day of this exploration are, as you mentioned, we have a tarot card, and we also have a line from Psalm 27, which is traditionally read during the month of Elul. And I included some other spiritual practices. I included a little bit of my own thoughts about both the card that I drew for that day and whatever came up out of that. There are questions for reflection. I have a couple of videos or other readings that folks can access as well.
It's really very cool. And just to clarify one piece of that, each day there's like a different short, usually I think one verse from Psalm 27. So you're getting at the fullness of this psalm over the course of the month. I don't remember if it's all in order. I don't think it is. You're helping people experience it, but in very bite-sized form. And when we do our Elul modalities, that's very much how we go about it. The notion, when we started, it was also a daily email list, a daily kind of experience where people would get a little bit of Elul experience, 5-10 minutes each day. And then over the course of the month, that actually adds up into a really meaningful on-ramp. I guess maybe it would help a little if we just look at one of these, and I'll put a link in the show notes so that our listeners can follow along too. We're headed to the second day, and I open it up. I see a poem called Teshuva, this word that you just mentioned around turning, by the Velveteen Rabbi, by Rachel Barenblatt. I see a classic story on the left about 2 slips of paper that this particular rabbi would always have in his pockets, and some of your thoughts on it. I scroll down, I see the language of forgiveness and a little bit of a meditation from you on that. I keep going, I see my Psalm 27 verse. This time it is, in fact, the first verse of that. Then I close with some questions. What is your light? What is your stronghold? Those are sort of call out words from Psalm 27. And that's the day. And it's pretty to look at visually. Like, I guess I'd love to hear sort of how you came to create this. Was this just kind of like, I want to do a particular thing for Elul, and maybe others will like it too? Or were you sort of starting from what folks out there might be interested in?
It was mostly because it was something I wanted to do. Also, I was working closely with another friend of mine who's a spiritual director on a different tarot class at the time that I conceived this idea. And something that I have found as a religious professional is that we often don't have the opportunity to experience the calendar of the year, of the Jewish year or the Christian year for Christian professionals as it's happening. So often we don't get to experience the high holidays during the high holiday season. And this is especially true, I think, of like pulpit rabbis, right? If you're creating these experiences for your congregation, you have to start early. The thing that was really beautiful about creating Turning Toward Life is I only worked a day or two in advance. So I didn't create the whole program and then release it. I would create a day or two at a time. Often the night before, I would draw a tarot card. The cards that I chose, I drew them right on the spot. They're not in any kind of order. And so I really worked with the tarot in the way I was mentioning earlier, as a way to speak to me about Elul, about the topics, and just take the card as it was and reflect on how that spoke to me about Elul. And I had encouraged folks who were participating in the program to do the same thing and maybe pull their own cards for the day.
And just to be really crystal clear, I mean, it was almost like an improv game. Like you grabbed the card and you were just like, this is going to tie to day 9 of Elul. There's going to be something spiritually right about that. It's a mystical act in many ways.
Absolutely. And it was almost less, this is going to, and more, how does this? So on day 3, the card I drew was the God or the Emperor. So I drew that card. I looked at the archetype. I thought about what the card means and considered how that ties into the themes of Elul. And then I wrote about it. Creating this program was super, super fun because I got to jam, right? I got to read the cards and think about what they meant and then tell a bunch of people what I thought. And I put reflection questions at the end of each day, which is a really good opportunity for folks to do their own tarot work. If that's something that's interesting to them, they might look at a question and say, I don't really know. And using the tarot as a tool to reflect on yourself, you might have read all of this, considered all of this, and then you get to the question, you draw your own tarot card, and you say, what does this card have to say to me about this particular question as it relates to my particular life?
You know, maybe just to state the obvious, but as I'm listening to you talk about this, I'm thinking about the weekly Torah portion reading where, usually the rabbi will...
Same 4 letters, of the 5 letters, T-O-R-A, the H is out, but T-A-R-O-T, so the T-A-R-O, the T-O-R-A.
Yeah, but like there's something that always has bothered me a little bit about the Torah reading, which is like, why do we have to have the sermon about this week's Torah reading? Maybe there was a different Torah portion that made more sense in terms of whatever's happening in the world today. And it just sort of seemed kind of random to me that we're always trying to shoehorn some message into this week's Torah reading. But it feels to me like there's a certain sense that I'm getting that that's kind of how the tarot might work. And there's something actually kind of cool about the randomness of the Torah reading. Like, it's not random because it's always in the same order every year, but it can kind of strike you as random because maybe that just happens to be the week that you came to synagogue, or it's random in the sense that the Hebrew calendar and the English, whatever, Gregorian calendar don't line up. And so things can be at different times of the year a little bit. So it's not really about, and I mean, like, as I say this, I'm like, duh, this is what we've been saying for 9 years on Judaism Unbound, but it's not really about what the Torah is saying. It's about how you come to that thing that week, and the magic is in the meeting point of the two, and that there's something that could spark creativity from the fact that you're only in control of half of that.
One of my favorite phrases about the Torah portions and how it's the same every year is the Torah is the same every year, but you're not. So what you read into it may be different. And tarot is very much the same. You could draw the same card today and next week and next month and get something entirely different out of it each time. One of the ways that I use tarot with other folks is actually to have them look at the card and tell me what they see. And it doesn't have anything to do with the traditional meanings of the card. It's just what jumps out at you. And imagery in different decks is very different. So what deck you choose impacts what images you see that are based around this kind of core theme, but then what folks get out of what they're looking at really has to do more with them than the card.
So that's really, really helpful. I love the Torah portion connection. That feels right to me. Although I will say, like, I think we should do the thing of switching the order, of switching the times of year of certain Torah portions. Like, I think that would be worthwhile. I think we would uncover different things. I'm flashing to when we've spoken about Jewish summer camp and how, like, what if we actually just took different holidays from other times of year that are not the summer and put them at Jewish summer camp where there's just people being wildly creative with programming. Cool things would arise with Hanukkah at Jewish summer camp. In the same way, I think the book of Exodus, which typically in the Torah portion cycle is winter, like, you could move it to the middle of summer and maybe it feels different at that point. I think it would. I think you'd be able to glean different things because, like, wherever you are in the flow of the year, the seasons, also the news, like all of that always informs how we read a Torah portion. That I'll say because you've given us a bit of a window into like why tarot is cool from your perspective. Like that's kind of my question is like, okay, so Mandie, I'm thrilled to hear, loved Elul Unbound. You wanted to do something with it. You wanted to bring your own Torah to the month of Elul, this on-ramp month. You could have done that in so many ways. Why is this the way you landed on to channel the introspective Teshuva muscles that you're trying to channel?
To be perfectly honest, the biggest reason is it is what I was doing at the time. It was kind of like my special interest of the moment.
That's a great answer. And it relates to what we're saying, right? It's the now, right? But say more about that.
Well, I'm a person who kind of flows into and out of interests and hobbies at any given moment. In terms of my spiritual life, the same thing is true. And at the time I was working with a friend of mine on a different tarot program. And so thinking about how tarot, which was this topic I was very much into at the moment, can connect to so many things. This question of how does this connect to Elul? And also, conversely, Elul is this time of deep introspection and deep reflection, which is also how I use tarot. It's a very natural connection, a very natural blending of resources.
That makes a ton of sense. I haven't spent much of my life soaking into tarot. I have grown more curious lately, especially watching Agatha All Along, which mobilizes tarot in some key plot points, the Marvel TV show, which also has a literal Torah service in it. Like there is a lot of Jewish in that show. But
Agatha was a rabbi in her previous iteration.
Maybe.
No, she was, right? Because she was the rabbi in Transparent.
Oh, yes, the actress, yeah. I thought you were making like a cool Marvel canon play, but maybe you are.
Maybe.
So, yes, the actress, Catherine Hahn, is also a rabbi. So, if I were thinking about tarot and Elul, I mean, I look at the month of Elul, and I'll be honest, I love it. I've grown through our Judaism Unbound initiatives in Elul to connect to it. If I didn't have that, I would struggle with it. And the reason for that is not that it isn't a powerful idea. I love that we have a month to get ready, to like spiritually ready, prepare ourselves for an intense 10-day period of Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur. That makes abundant sense to me. And the ways that I best soak into ritual are with like a particular core practice that's quick and short and repeatable. And that's why I look at certain rituals like Hanukkah. Okay, you get with your loved ones, light some candles, say a few words, takes 3 to 5 minutes, and you do it each night. And then it's a little different because you go up the number of candles or you go down depending on how you light, but most people go up. The Omer, counting the days between Passover and Shavuot. You have something that you say each day, you count the days. Elul, there are traditional things to do. You mentioned Psalm 27. It's said each day, and there's also hearing the shofar.
Fun fact, Lex, my original plan for the name of my program was Tarot as Shofar.
Ooh, I like that
and
a lot.
That was totally inspired by you and by Elul Unbound and how you would have a different shofar in your emails every day. You're like, here's
our wake-up calls, yeah.
Yeah, your wake-up calls, and here's an alarm bell as your shofar, and here's this other thing. So I was like, tarot could be our wake-up call.
That's spectacular. I mean, I love that. And part of what I loved about those wake-up calls is that they were different, right? Like, that's what I'm getting to, is like the Hanukkah ritual, it changes each day a little bit. It's still overall the same ritual, but it changes a little bit. Omer, too. It changes a little bit because you go up a number. And there's a crescendo. There's something nice about that. Elul, there isn't that from like traditional Jewish sources. I mean, maybe if somebody knows of something that I don't know about, like, please email us. It could be that I'm wrong. But the traditions I know are just like you hear the shofar and you read or say Psalm 27. What yours adds is it has that piece of rhythmicness, of repeatedness, but there's also the variety of, this day it's a new card, and this day it's these questions. So my curiosity is like, could we do things like this with other parts of the Jewish year effectively? Should we? Or do you see this as like, I really believe that Elul is the moment that tarot should best fit with Jewish tradition?
I really believe tarot could fit with anything. I felt like this program worked so well for Elul for exactly the reason that you're describing. It's kind of nebulous. And this idea that I am giving an accounting of my soul, that's super overwhelming. Where do I start? Okay, I could start thinking about every bad thing I did this year. But for me, oftentimes something a little deeper and less shamey, to be honest. Like, it's good to think about the things that we could have done better, but also there are lots of ways that we can just grow as people. And so this program kind of narrows the focus a little bit. You get one or two things to think about every day. It's not just out there in the world. There's just this small, narrow piece to look at every day, bite-sized pieces.
Well, along similar lines, in your role as a spiritual director, in your role as just a person, particularly a person maybe that came from a different tradition in your life, when I think about, how can we make Elul better? We could add the tarot to it. Or how can we make any holiday better? We could add the tarot to it. The deeper question that comes up for me is like, what's missing from the Jewish holidays as they are, or from the Jewish experiences as they are? People have certain spiritual needs that are not being met by just, hey, go do Judaism as it is, go join your local synagogue, right? There's something missing. And I'm wondering, and obviously that's the core question of our show, but I think that often we're asking how might it be addressed without necessarily always asking what's the issue. And so when I talk to you in your role as a spiritual director, I'm curious if there are things that you hear from people where there are particular needs that people seem to have that just kind of doing it the old way isn't quite meeting, but yet there are important parts of Judaism that could meet them. If we didn't believe that, we wouldn't be doing this show. I always emphasize that we believe in Judaism. We believe in the raw material very strongly. We just don't believe that it's put together, always wired together in just the right way that's going to work for us today. So I'm curious about that other side of the equation, which is what are the unmet needs? It strikes me that the tarot is a technology. In other words, it's a thing. You could buy it in a store. It's a deck. And yet, because it can come in different orders and people can interpret the cards in different ways, it has unlimited capacity for meaning making. And somehow maybe that's part of the directionality. I mean, maybe Judaism is, as it's currently wired, tends to be wired in such a way that imagines that everybody's the same and therefore needs exactly the same thing to happen, where what we really need is a version of Judaism that would be more like a deck of cards.
Well, it's so funny that you say that, Dan, because I'm listening to you talk about tarot and I'm like, well, yeah, Torah is the same way, which for someone who kind of was Jewishly raised on Judaism Unbound, you guys were a huge part of my process of discernment as I was deciding, am I going to convert to Judaism or not? I had not yet converted when I came to the first Elul Unbound gatherings, and I was processing that in those gatherings and with those people. So I was kind of Jewishly raised on Judaism Unbound. And like many people who convert to Judaism, I am super into traditional Jewish technologies too. This is one of the things that I find really congruent between the way I practice Judaism in more traditional ways and the way that I practice the kind of Jew-witchery vibe, which I think you guys have talked to other folks on your show who identify in that way. There's just so much in common and so much similar in how these technologies work. It's really about what you're bringing to them and what you're allowing them to bring to you. One of the things I say about tarot sometimes is it's like the opposite side of prayer. So when you're praying, you're speaking. And when you're reading tarot, you're listening. And what you're listening to varies depending on who's doing the reading, but you're listening for what messages are coming through the cards coming through your subconscious. The cards are really like a funnel.
So I'd love to time travel a little bit. You've mentioned that we were a key part of your discernment process. You're finding your way into Jewish tradition. I want to name that, given that, the fact that you made this Elul tarot experience, turning toward life, in 2019, like, I don't know the precise sequence of things, but to me, it's extraordinarily cool that as you were in the midst of this discernment, or as you were in the midst of converting, or maybe you had just recently converted, whatever it was, you went to, I'm going to create a thing for other Jews to experience. Like, you didn't just say, okay, I'm new to this, I'm tiptoeing into the waters. I guess I dunked. You have to go more than tiptoes if you're in the mikvah.
Yes, I had dunked at that point.
But I'm tiptoeing once I'm past. Maybe that's the metaphor. Actually, maybe that's actually the teaching. We immerse fully in the water. We don't tiptoe. Maybe that's where I'm going.
Right.
Like, you didn't tiptoe. You said implicitly, you didn't like write this out, but hey, I am Jewish. I am a creator of Jewish tradition and practice. I'm doing that now, immediately. And I'd kind of love to hear from you about that. Part of me is interested in, like, autobiographically, why you think that was something you did. I do think it's really amazing. I'm curious if the particular kinds of amazing it is, we might be able to distill and help others out there who have recently converted, like, channel it. How can we help people surmount what others sometimes experience, which is this sense that, oh, sure, I'm Jewish now, but it's not my place to create Judaism, to intervene in a holiday or a Halal month, whatever we want to call Elul. How might we help folks with that, and how can we use your example to do so?
Well, I think this is that. Judaism Unbound is that. By creating new ways of doing Judaism and putting them out into the world, we're giving people permission to engage with Judaism in different ways. I mean it so literally. I spent so much time saying, oh, well, do I get to have this? Is this really okay? What if I don't agree with everything? What if, am I appropriating? And you all just create such an open, generous space to allow people to play with what it means to be and do Jewish. That gave me permission to say, yeah, maybe I'm going to do this differently. And that doesn't make me any less Jewish. Particularly as someone who converted, I am kind of the Jewish spokesperson for a lot of my community, which some folks would just be horrified at that idea, because someone who's doing tarot and calling it Jewish should not be the spokesperson for Judaism. But for me, it really speaks to the sense that Judaism could be plural, right? Judaisms.
Part of me is curious about the specific thing you just mentioned, that, like, not only did you have the chutzpah, the courage to make a Jewish thing right after converting, the thing you did was part of a realm that, some people look at tarot and they're like, oh, it's witchcraft, it's magic, that's not allowed. Which, like, I think so little of that notion that we sometimes don't even respond to it. We don't even, like, really treat it as an argument, because I find it so abominable. But it does reflect that not only did you have the courage to do something creative with Judaism, you had the courage to do something that some see as forbidden. That's beautiful to me in a bunch of ways, because my sense is that that was you blending elements of your newly Jewish self and things that you had an existing relationship with. My sense is that your tarot relationship was predating your connection to Judaism, and you were sort of blending the two.
Yeah. One of the things I have found to be very useful to me as a spiritual director is that I have experienced so many different forms of spirituality. Came out of evangelical Christianity when I was a teenager. I explored paganism. I explored, earth-centered traditions. I was Unitarian Universalist for a long time. I was actually in seminary to become a Unitarian Universalist minister when I discovered Judaism. So I have a lot of experience in all of these different realms. And so bringing those together, it just makes sense to me there are so many pieces of all of these things that I've learned that are very meaningful. I do believe that anybody can create something different and Jewish. And I also want to recognize I have some training as a spiritual and religious leader. So that's already kind of I was already trained to be doing that. I was already trained to be interpreting texts and creating things for people. And I do have this background in a variety of spiritual perspectives and modalities. That just made it easier for me. It didn't make me more qualified. It just meant I had fewer hurdles to jump over.
We recently got an email from a listener that I found so intriguing, that also a person who wasn't currently Jewish and basically ran a AI search, ChatGPT, and like asked a number of questions, like sort of looking for a religion, and said it has to have this, and it has to, be egalitarian, and it has to be LGBTQ friendly, and it has to be pro-choice. And it told the person that they should explore Judaism.
It said Reform Judaism, which I mentioned only because I think it's interesting that it gave that caveat.
Yeah, well, part of it is that it should have said Unbound Judaism. It didn't know about it, I guess. Although I will say, it does
know about us in other respects. When you ask for Jewish resources online, it frequently points to us. And by the way, please don't email us. We know that ChatGPT does all sorts of evil things.
Yeah,
we know that there are lots of problems with this. We are also just interested in what is already happening on it and trying to stay informed.
Yeah. Anyway, but the question is, I guess, as a human ChatGPT, we're not going to destroy the environment by asking you this question. Not in a sense of hey, folks listening to this who may actually already be religious leaders of some kind or have religious leadership training, like you said. Who do you think is out there that you think Judaism or maybe Unbound Judaism would appeal to? What are they looking for? What is the job to be done for folks like you were a decade ago, or a little less than a decade ago?
I think the big message is we all have something that is really deeply meaningful. For some people, it's bird watching. For some people, it's gardening. For some people, it's writing or tarot. It is such a gift to take whatever is your special interest, for lack of a better term, and turn it toward this tradition and just say, oh, this tradition speaks to my hobby in this way, or my hobby can speak to or connect to tradition in this way, or Judaism has something to say, could have something to say. I could have something to say to Judaism. I think the month of Elul looks around and says, what do people need? And we have an opportunity to find it. So we need time to really reflect. How often do we really slow down? This is one of the things that's so beautiful about Judaism, right? We've got the Sabbath. We slow down and reflect. And my program really offers an opportunity to do that in small and bite-sized, hopefully non-intimidating ways. A lot of the folks that I work with are intimidated by institutional religion, by those trappings and structures of prayer and song and big building and all of these things. And so to have a more accessible, gentle way in is meeting a need. And actually, you mentioned that I have a card for every day. I did not draw a card on Shabbat. Shabbat was a day each week where I really encourage folks to just kind of rest, relax, integrate, do their own work. And I think we need more opportunities for that. The world is so much on fire. We're all running around with our fire hoses all of the time. But we also have to take turns. And I think this provides a good opportunity for that.
I think that there is power in what you said about folks who have existing spiritual leadership skills who are converting to Judaism. It might not even be convert. It might be that there are people that have forms of teaching, guidance, experience in their lives. I don't think our Jewish communities do a good enough job a lot of the time looking around and being who here is really excellent at holding spiritual space. If I were talking to them, they'd be like, I don't know anything about Hanukkah. I don't know anything about Sukkot. I don't know anything about Rosh Hashanah. So I'm not the one to lead those. Actually, I actually think that there are a lot of people out there who are extremely skilled at holding space for a group conversation because it's something they do in their life all the time. Or they're a teacher and so they're able to work with people a certain way. Or they have one-on-one interactions a lot as part of their job if they're a spiritual director or other kinds of counselor or something. Like, we don't look around and be like, yes, that person should lead a Jewish program. We'll teach them like who Korach is or whatever, if the program is supposed to be about that guy Korach from the Book of Numbers. Or we'll give a few bullet points of what Simchat Torah is or what, like, and then they'll do a great thing because it's actually more important to come with that background. Like, I think you're totally right, Mandie, that like you were ready to go. I'm not here to say you didn't like benefit and enjoy a process of immersing literally and otherwise in the waters of Judaism. And what you gained was not like you transformed from somebody who was totally incapable of holding Jewish space to somebody who is now capable. You gained like a bit more grounding so that you could channel skills you already had. That's less a question than a comment. I do think it's worth noting because I know there's listeners out there who are in that spot and who are not having rabbis in their community say, yep, you're the one who should be holding space. You actually, a Google dive of like, what is Sukkot is all you need to be able to create an amazing Sukkot experience because you're already there. Part of me wants to say that to our listeners. But the question I do have related to that is, it's an eternal question of ours. Like, how do we help people that haven't surmounted the chutzpah barrier? Like, that haven't done the high jump? Like, the high jump bar in Jewish life for like, I know enough to lead Jewish things is high. There are two ways to confront that problem. One is keep the bar exactly where it is, but teach people a bunch of stuff or give people a bunch of skills. That's a lot of work. The other is lower the bar and say you actually don't need all the things that the world is telling you need. And so I'm curious, like, given that you were able to do so pretty immediately, how might others do so?
I mean, technically the bar is 13, right? If a 13-year-old can do it, if a 12-year-old can do it, why can't you? Right? That's the bar for you're ready to take an active part in leading a Jewish community in some way or other.
By the way, I like that interpretation of the bar mitzvah. That's the bar.
Whoa, Dan! Oh,
but we could turn it into an ungendered idea. Like,
it's just a literal bar. Like you get rid of the word bar or bet resh in Hebrew, and it's just like a literal bar mitzvah.
Yeah.
It's an emoji. I love it.
That would be a great emoji. The other thing that made this easier, even for me as someone who has training as a religious professional, but I also did have a lot of that Jewish imposter syndrome going on, it's small. In one of the emails, I called the group of people who were following me along the trip our little minion, because there were 10 of us. It was a very small group of people. I wasn't up on a bima, right? I wasn't in a pulpit. I wasn't on stage. I wasn't leading a congregation. I think there's something that feels presumptive to say, I should be leading these people in how to Jewish. I didn't approach this as a way to teach people how to be Jewish. I approached it as a way to use my particular skill set to help people explore how to be human. And I used Jewish technologies to do it. And I tried to make it something that could be accessible to folks who didn't have any clue about what any of that meant. I wanted to be able to put quotes from Psalms in a program that might be followed by people who have religious trauma and maybe are afraid of scripture, to be able to say there are different ways to look at this. All of that is to say, starting small and taking what you have, and maybe learning a little bit about Sukkot and working with a small group of people, especially as a convert. Do you know what's great is teaching people who are not Jewish, Teaching people who are not Jewish is a great way to get over the idea that you don't have the authority to teach about Judaism, because you definitely have more than people who don't know anything, didn't want to know anything, don't have any connection to Judaism. You could teach them.
It's interesting. Like, there have been not a small number of people who have had a similar experience that you're describing. They found Judaism unbound. It encouraged them. They wanted to convert to Judaism, and then they went to rabbinical school. And I'm like, oh, come on. No, but I mean, it's okay. Like, I totally understand it. And I think actually those are the kind of rabbis that I want. So it's fine. You're out there, you're listening.
This close.
You're fine. It's okay.
So that was my question. I mean, it's kind of like, I think it's two-part question as usual. One is about yourself. How do you think about that question? How do you think about the desire to go to rabbinical school for somebody who already thought about becoming some kind of religious leader, and now how does that all go in your thinking? And then I'm also curious about whether coming from other, or maybe being more knowledgeable about other ways that other traditions have religious leadership and train religious leadership. I'm wondering if you have insight to notions of how we might do that differently in Judaism. Like I always kind of fantasize about a world where we had elders and that really meant something. Maybe they would even be trained, or a world that had, small group leaders that were trained, not for 6 years of rabbinical school, but for 6 months maybe, right? Or something like that. And I'm curious if there are models that we ought to be looking at that you've seen.
Well, for better or worse, I think a lot of how we do Jewish leadership in the United States is based real strongly on how Protestants do religious leadership in the United States. So I don't think there's a lot more to be gained from that particular set of practices. And I was never, I don't think, deeply enough involved in any of the less mainstream religious traditions to be able to speak deeply about that. One thing I experienced, this is such a common refrain in seminary, particularly in liberal seminaries in the Christian world, especially in the Unitarian Universalist world, is that people wanted to learn more about how to be religious, or they wanted to deepen their own spirituality. And so they went to seminary, which is not often a great way to learn to be more deeply spiritual. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But I think that really speaks to a lack of, I think it says we're doing something wrong on the ground if you can't get the kind of spiritual depth and intellectual access and learning and practice without going to school to be a religious leader. If the only people who have access to that are people on a path of religious leadership, we're doing something wrong. I don't know how to fix it, but maybe that's an answer to your earlier question. What is missing? Possibly that kind of access.
Well, it brings us around to the tarot in a really interesting way, because the tarot, I mean, of course, you can be an expert in tarot reading as one can be an expert in anything, but at least it strikes me that the tarot is a more accessible, a more inviting technology of spirituality than a lot of what's out there, right? And it's something that just a regular person can buy a deck and maybe buy a book and a pamphlet to understand how it works, and can start to do things that are actually maybe really profound and meaningful, in part because, as we discussed, the real magic is happening in the encounter between the thing and you, right? And you're you, you're the only you that can be possibly brought to this particular thing. So you've already got half of it right there, or maybe a third of it, I guess, because there's the thing, there's you, and then there's the meeting place, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I don't want to put tarot on too high of a pedestal, because there are absolutely gatekeepers. There are gatekeepers everywhere. There are always people who are going to say, you don't know enough about this to teach other people. You don't deserve to be in this inner core. That's as true of tarot as it is of anything else. You absolutely have people out there saying, this is the right way to read it, and this is the wrong way to read it, and you're doing it wrong. And then you have people who say there are no right and wrong ways. There's only what comes up for you. As you were talking about, anybody can buy a tarot deck and a pamphlet. I'm like, anybody could buy a copy of Torah and a commentary, right? And it's funny because every time I talk to folks who grew up Jewish, and are not really into Judaism anymore, I hear the same story from them that I hear from people who grew up Christian and are not Christian anymore. And they listen to me talk about Judaism and how much I love it. And they're like, wait, what? There's something that you get from not having had it imposed on you that creates a spirit of openness. And that's what I was trying to create with this program, is just this spirit of openness and access and play, and that recognition that different people need different modalities. And that's also part of why tarot was not the only piece of this program. Tarot was kind of the way in, but also there was poetry and music, and there were a lot of different points of entry.
So this has been really, really beautiful. And I'm realizing, I mean, Dan's alluding to at least one other person. I mean, one of the people who went to rabbinical school, who we got a similar note from, who converted, like they were also at the first year of Elul Amba. I mean, there are a number of people who...
I think I know who you're talking about. We formed a pretty good friendship that year.
Yeah, that's terrific and unsurprising. But like, because there's a certain ness that arises in that Elul Unbound space. There's a certain ness that arises in other of our spaces. And it brings me to my sort of closing question, which is the power of digital Judaism. And look, I'm a broken record on that. I've said everything I have to say about that 4 to 6 to 100 times. So I won't give my thing on why I think where we are right now, for the three of us in a Zoom room talking, for the thousands of people listening in a podcast app, this is a sacred space. It's not only sacred. There's plenty of terrible things that happen in this space, just like offline spaces are both sacred and horrible in so many ways. But as we close, I mean, I'd love to hear from you. This whole conversation is about modalities of Jewish experience and broader experience that took place only because of this digital world we live in. And truly, it doesn't have to be about us, because I know you're connected to other digital Jewish and digital spiritual projects. Like, as we close, for all the listeners out there that are listening and feel deeply connected to others that are part of the Judaism Unboundiverse and others who are part of digital Jewish experience beyond us, I guess I'd love to reassure them that they're not full of crap, and they're not just like, oh, you're stuck in your screens and you're not really paying attention to the world around you, like all this stuff people say, and hear from somebody like you who has been thoroughly transformed by digital Judaism.
If I didn't have access to digital Judaism, I wouldn't be Jewish. You often can't tell by listening to me talk. You often can't tell by watching me on stage. I am an introvert. I do not do well in unfamiliar environments. I have all kinds of imposter syndrome. I converted to Judaism alone. I did not come from a Jewish family. Like, I didn't marry into a Jewish family. I am the only person who is Jewish. I didn't have anyone to hold my hand and walk me through this and teach me how to do it. And I was too scared to go to a local shul. A synagogue was not a thing I felt comfortable stepping foot into for a really long time. The way that I learned Judaism was through podcasts and subreddits, and God, watch out for those. And, just there's so, like you said, there's so many beautiful things on the internet and so many terrible things on the internet. But if that's what you've got, we use the tools that are available to us, and being able to dive really deeply into the subjects and the topics and explore different opinions and ideas. There's a certain amount of that you can only get when you have a way to be connected beyond your own physical community. And for me, this may not be true for everyone, but for me, digital Judaism was also my entry into being connected to the larger world of Judaism in my community, as well as digitally. It was my doorway. Digital Judaism was my doorway into Jewish community, both locally and globally. And I am able to access so many more resources in so many different ways. And digital Judaism is an accessibility question. A lot of people don't have an opportunity, whether because they're introverted or because they don't have the mobility or because they have immune disorders and can't be in a physical community. Without digital Judaism, they wouldn't have access to Judaism. So for me, it was just so crucial to be able to have this doorway into the Jewish world.
Thank you so much, Mandie McGlynn, for joining us. This has been such a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Lex and Dan. It is so cool to me that my entry to Judaism was so closely tied to Judaism Unbound. And now I've come full circle and I got to be here on your podcast as you're approaching your 10-year anniversary. I feel so honored and so lucky to be part of it.
And we feel so honored that you're part of our Judaism Unbound ecosystem. That goes for Mandie McGlynn and for all of you out there listening. Thanks so much for doing so. And we hope that you'll continue listening to Judaism Unbound moving forward. As a reminder, we've got Elul Unbound coming up. The month of Elul begins in just a few weeks as this episode is released. It's the month that leads into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and which is devoted to introspection and preparation before the high holidays. You can sign up for our 2025 edition of Elul Unbound by heading to judaismunbound.com/ELUL. It will say 2024 if you head there super quickly after this is released. Don't fear, still sign up for the email list. That will go to the correct one for this coming year. Also, as we close, we want to encourage you to be in touch with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode, on other episodes, on our work more broadly, and you can be in touch in any of the following ways. First, there's our Facebook and Instagram handles. Both of those are at Judaism Unbound. Second, there's our website, judaismunbound.com, where you can check out show notes for this episode, all sorts of other great resources, and as mentioned, our Elul stuff that's coming up. Also, you can email us at dan@judaismunbound.com or lex@judaismunbound.com with your visions for the future, your questions, your comments on these episodes, whatever you've got. And we're so appreciative when folks are able to support us financially with either a monthly recurring gift or a one-time donation at judaismunbound.com/donate. So thanks so much for listening. If you did not yet listen to Stav Appel's episode about Torah and tarot from last week, we definitely encourage you to go and listen to that because it ties very much to this week's. But with that, this has been Judaism Unbound.